It's clear that for Donald Trump, Iran is, if you like, the next big foreign policy issue after Ukraine. Ukraine is still work in progress. We're not making any progress really on the whole question of trying to find a ceasefire there. And he's just been talking to the Israeli Prime Minister. But at the back of his mind is still Iran. And remember that Donald Trump, when he was president last time around, was the guy who tore up what we called in the jargon JCPOA, which was an agreement signed by America, but also the other permanent members of the Security Council, including the UK in 2015, which stopped Iran developing nuclear weapons. Trump tore it up and said it was the worst deal ever negotiated. And now he wants to start again with the Iranians to see whether a deal can be struck. He's threatening that he's going to bomb Iran if they do not sign up very quickly to the sort of deal that he's got in mind. We don't know what that deal is. We do know that on the whole, it's wise to take Trump not necessarily at his word, but to take seriously what he threatens. And so people are right, I think, to be nervous about this. But Iran is a country which takes its own sovereignty very seriously, regardless of what we might think about its support for terrorist groups in the region. And it will not take lightly to attempts by the United States of America to start attacking it. And of course, the rest of the world these days is changing its view about America. America used to be regarded as the leader of the free world, and we would all, by and large, reckon that they were doing the right thing. But I think that these days, a lot of people are changing their view of the United States of America. So if it does start being a conflict, there will be a number of countries which will be asking themselves very seriously whether that is something that they can accept. I don't think you can ever take Putin at his word. We know how he lied and tried to deceive everybody before he invaded Ukraine in 2022. Russia, of course, has had a bit of a diplomatic defeat in Syria. Both Russia and Iran ended up having to see their client, Bashar al-Assad, overthrown in Syria just a few months ago. And I'm not sure that they want to get involved in many other conflicts. They've got their work cut out in Ukraine, which has gone much worse than Putin expected or promised. So I suspect he wouldn't be very keen on getting involved with the conflict. And of course, even Russia is not very keen on the proliferation of nuclear weapons. So to defend something which is about allowing Iran to get nuclear weapons, he might not be too keen on. But what I would caution is that as the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said in his op-ed in the Washington Post just a couple of days ago, in the agreement that we all signed with Iran in 2015, Iran was very clear, and I wrote it down, that Iran will not ever seek, develop, or acquire nuclear weapons. And as far as they are concerned, that is still their formal position, even though the United States walked away from that deal. That 2015 JCPOA, the Joint Cooperative Program of Action, is still intact as far as the other governments that signed it are concerned, including the United Kingdom. So they are clear that they're not developing nuclear weapons. And unless there was very clear evidence that Iran was going to do that, I'm not sure that many people are going to want to support the United States. Would they come militarily to the defense of Iran? That's another question. Iran does not have very many friends in the region. And as I said, I suspect the Kremlin thinks they're pretty overextended at the moment. So I would not expect them to come to the rescue. Then, of course, it depends very much on what kind of military action you're talking about. Are you talking about targeted military strikes on a small number of critical nuclear installations and enrichment plants, or are you talking about a wider conflict? And I think the reaction of other countries in the region will depend very much on what it comes to. But I suspect, my hunch at the moment is that a lot of this is threatening talk designed to try to ensure that the negotiations in Oman this weekend between senior people from both Iran and the United States reach some kind of diplomatic agreement, or at least make some progress, which will move us away from the talk of actual war between the United States and Iran, which I think most of us would regard as a serious and probably unnecessary escalation of conflict in an already unstable region. One of the reasons why the Iranians have gone along with these talks and why you're getting conciliatory messages from the very able Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and from President Pezeshkian is that the Iranians have had a bad run. That is to say, a lot of their clients, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, have had a pasting in the last few months. And what's more, their own air defenses, which they were boasting about not long ago, were very badly damaged by the last round of Israeli military strikes. So they're not in great shape in terms of their ability to either operate forward defense in neighboring countries like Lebanon and Syria and Yemen and Gaza. Um, and they're not in great shape either in terms of shooting down any missiles or aircraft which come in their direction. They're not in great shape either because the economic sanctions are making the Iranian people and the Iranian currency extremely weak. And so they are interested in a conversation. They're not going to roll over. They never do. Iranians are very difficult negotiators. But although you're right, they're talking about, getting prepared to defend themselves, and what sovereign country wouldn't. The reason why they want to do talks at the moment is that they are in a weaker position militarily and diplomatically than they were just a few months back. I think given Trump and given the way in which he's upset the apple cart in so many different ways, whether it's in terms of tariff policy, whether it's in terms of more or less offering the Kremlin Ukraine on a plate, whether it's in terms of making, frankly, unreasonable territorial demands of Canada, Panama, Greenland, you know, everything looks and feels different. So I think the West is not quite as secure as it was. If Iran and America ended up having a scrap, and as I say, I think these talks, I hope, are at least designed, despite all the pressurizing advanced conversations we've had, they're designed to try to avoid that. But if it does come to that, I'm not sure that other countries will need to get involved. Uh, if Iran had a war with Israel, that would be different. Then you would see the United States and possibly the United Kingdom and possibly France and others coming to Israel's defense because we've done that in the past. If it's the United States having a war with Iran, I'm not sure that other countries would get involved. As you say, Russia might well not. Iran hasn't got very many allies. The Chinese would stand aside. I'm not sure that the United States would need other countries to support it. But the risk, and I think this is what you're hinting at, is that Iran might decide to hit some softer targets which belong to America's allies in order to broaden the scope of the conflict. And that must be a risk to all of us. They would probably activate the Houthis in terms of further damage to shipping in the Red Sea, which is what we have seen in the past. Um, but at the same time, Iran's diplomats are extremely sophisticated. They would not want to do something which meant that the international community was inclined to side with America and against them. They would rather try to argue that what America is doing is illegal, irrational, and unnecessary, given that, as they will tell us, unlike Israel, they don't have nuclear weapons, and they are members of the international conventions like the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which means that nuclear inspectors have access to the nuclear sites in Iran, which they don't have in Israel, as they constantly remind us. So I think they will be careful about trying to ensure that they retain as much as possible of the diplomatic high ground if it comes to a shooting war. And my obviously my hope is that it doesn't. But my belief is that the talks in Oman, despite the bluster, are probably intended by both sides to avoid that and to give Trump what he regards as a great deal. The problem for him is that the only deal that the Iranians might be prepared to offer is no better than the deal he tore up in 2018, saying it was the worst deal ever negotiated by the United States of America. But that won't necessarily put him off. He can declare victory for whatever deal he strikes and say it's the best deal ever. I think it's a good thing that there is a desire for a conversation. It is a good thing that diplomatically Tehran seems ready to talk, but I suspect we'll find there's quite a big gap between what Iran can live with, and they can certainly live with reinstating something along the lines of the 2015 agreement, and what some of President Trump's senior officials seem to say that they will be demanding. So I think watch this space. And let us hope that this is a significant attempt to come to some sort of political agreement, even if it takes time to do the details, rather than a precursor to dropping bombs on installations in Iran with, as you have said before, the risk of a wider regional conflict.